Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Picture the Scene podcast, a true crime podcast that aims to put you, the listener, at the scene of the crime. Now, I want to thank everyone who gave us feedback on the last episode, so much so that we're going to extend the trial of the new format to this one. So please do keep that feedback coming in. So, it's been a while, longer than I wanted it to be, but I've been busy. How have you been since we last recorded, Rach?
I have been longing for our next recording. I know I've been all good. Obviously, since our last recording, I've had the time to read a book which has sparked the content for today's episode. So that's been a bit of an eye opener. But on the positive note, the content of the book was not positive at all whatsoever, but on a positive note, it's got me back into reading actual books instead of just listening to them. So that's been nice. So I've spent some time getting back into that. How about you? How are you?
I'm good. I've been good.
Just good.
I've been sparkly, Rachel. Life has been busy, but it's been sparkingly busy.
And you're on the cusp of doing something, aren't you?
Yes, I'm going on holiday next week.
Woohoo! How exciting. I think I'm more excited for this holiday than Andrew is.
I'm really looking forward to it. I need a bit of sun and relaxation. So I'm glad to hear you're okay. I'm glad to hear you're really looking forward to my holiday, Rachel. But so let's move on to the case. It's going to be a long one today, chaps and chapesses. So I need to say to everyone that there's some aspects of this case where we'll have to go into some detail about the death of a child. As always, we'll keep it respectful and not sensational at all. And we've tried to keep all injury aspects out where possible. But please turn off right now if it's not for you. The reason we chose this case is because of the book The Sleep of Reason, which is one that Rachel mentioned a moment ago. I believe I bought you that for your birthday last year, didn't I, Rachel? Right, did I?
You did, and you keep on reminding me you bought it for me for my birthday, and it's an incredibly hard book to read, so I don't quite know if you had like a slight lapse of judgment there, Andrew.
No.
But on the flip side, I totally forgot it was your birthday a few weeks ago and omitted to wish you a happy birthday, so maybe, I shouldn't complain that A, you remembered my birthday, and B, got me a present.
Didn't mention it for that. It was actually my dog's birthday a few days ago. I was more interested in that than my own, but
Oh, happy birthday, Jet.
But the reason I got you that, and the reason why we're now covering this case now, is because I've read it a few times, or I've listened to it and read it, and Rachel, she just told us recently read it, and I think it's probably the best non-fiction book I've ever read, and probably will ever be. So I know that's a bold statement. I've leaned heavily into the book, along with some more reliable sources to write this. So at no point are we assuming details, and if we're going to say our opinions, it'll be obvious, won't it, Rach?
Yeah, and on your point, this episode it is going to be a hard one today. Like when I was reading the script, I was upset reading it and reliving some of the story. It is one of the most well-known and disturbing cases in modern British criminal history. A case that sent shockwaves through not only Merseyside and the rest of the UK, but it impacted the world. And it's one of those cases where even if you don't remember every single detail, the name is burnt into your memory, the name of the victim. It's one of those stories that will leave a mark not just on the families involved or the local community, but on the entire nation, and one of the darkest chapters in modern British criminal history.
So, if it's safe for you to do so, we'd like you to sit back, close your eyes, and picture the scene. It's Friday, the 12th of February, 1993, and we're in the town of Bootle, just north of Liverpool, which is in Merseyside. This isn't the Liverpool of postcards and Beatles tours. It's a real city outskirts, gritty, proud, and lived in. It's a town stitched together by council estates, terrace houses, and rows of shops with faded signs and roll-down shutters. There's a sense of community here, even in the wear and tear. People nod to one another in passing. Kids play football in alleyways between houses. You can still hear the murmur of neighbours talking over back fences.
And that's not just a 1993 thing, that is in the here and now. It's an incredible northern community and mentality, that's still very much ongoing.
The sky above is grey and unmoving. It's not threatening, but it's low and dull, just like it's like a lid on a day. The air is crisp but manageable. There's no snow, no frost, just that typical northern chill that clings to your sleeves and make your breath visible in short bursts. It's cold enough to feel winter, but not enough to rush you inside. Now the Strand shopping centre sits in the centre of it all. A 2-story covered complex that's the heartbeat of Butu's High Street. It's not glamorous, it's not modern, even back in 1993, but what it is practical and familiar. Inside, it's warm, artificially lit with strip lighting that flickers slightly, and the walkways are lined with shops like Woolworths, Mother Care, TJ Hughes, and Tandy. It's places where local families go to buy school shoes, toys, electricals, or even just a quick sausage roll for lunch.
If there was something that's going to date this episode, it's you reeling out those shop titles. Like, all
Awesome.
but, well, all of them, they're no longer on the high street, are they?
TJ Hughes is. I used to work for TJ Hughes as the assistant floor manager. It's got like 2 shops left now or something. It used to
Wow,
have
okay.
dozens, yeah. But yeah, no,
There you
you're
go.
right. There's a clatter of pushchairs, the beep of tails, and the low background hum of everyday life. Children bounce between their parents' legs, tugging at hands, pointing at shelves stacked with sweets. Teenagers loiter near the escalators, sharing crisps and glances, wearing oversized coats and trying their best not to look 12. Staff call to one another over displays. Somewhere, the unmistakable Tanner voice calls out, "Could a member of staff?" And with the ending remaining a mystery, as it always did and always will do. Outside of the centre, just beyond the back entrance, runs the Leeds Liverpool Canal. It's wide, slow, and brownish grey at this time of the year. It cuts behind its shopping area like a forgotten border, flowing silently past abandoned yards, railway lines, and goods depots. The kind of places people pass by without even looking too hard. The canal path leads eventually towards Breeze Hill, fringed by railings and the occasional bench, the type you wouldn't look twice at. But later, these places, the canal, the hill, the back steps by the reservoir, will matter deeply. Because elsewhere in the centre, at this same moment, a young mother named James Bulger is holding a 2-year-old son's hand. They're doing what so many others are doing, running errands, browsing clothes, visiting TJ Hughes to exchange some underwear, maybe stopping for a quick ride or snack. James is curious and energetic, dressed in his little blue anorak and grey tracksuit bottoms with white stripes down the leg. He's just 38 days from his 3rd birthday, now just a short distance away, also in a Strand. 2 other boys, John Venables and Robert Thompson, both aged 10, are wandering. They're not shopping, they're not waiting for anyone, they're just wandering. In a few minutes, the 3 of them, James, John, and Robert, will walk out of the shopping centre together. One of them will never return, and the city and the country will never forget what happened next.
Let's go to the morning of the 12th then, shall we? It's before 9 a.m. and the 2 10-year-old boys, John and Robert, or Bobby as his family would call him, they had already decided to skip school for the day. Wagging, as most would call it, but in Bootle it was usually called sagging. John had already hidden his school bag at the top of his street. It wasn't needed, as he wasn't going into school, and it would only get in the way. He'd arranged to meet Bobby at the top of the street in the village. And he did. Bobby had brought his younger brother Ryan with him, intending to get him to miss school too, but Ryan wasn't having any of it. He'd rather be in school today. It was pottery day, and he really liked that. John had offered him £2, even though he didn't have the £2, to skip school, but Ryan had refused. So even though Ryan was with Bobby when he met John, he soon parted ways with them and made his way onto school, happy in the knowledge he'd still get to do pottery. John stood at 4'8" tall with a bowl-style haircut. Bobby had a number 2 all over, standing at 4'6" tall. 2 inches just separating their height, and 2 weeks separating their birthdays of these 2 10-year-old friends. The 2 boys thought they'd managed to avoid being seen. They'd cut down back alleys to avoid the school gates, but a friend of theirs from school, Nicola, had seen them and immediately told a teacher they'd been sagging. That same teacher was frustrated. Just the day before, John had been playing up in class, disrupting his classmates, so after school she'd moved his desk to the back of the class, commenting to other teachers when she saw them that she was determined to help John get to the root cause and stop his naughty behaviour. She put a red mark down during registration against John and Bobby's name, and then told the head teacher, Irene Slack, who did, during the morning, try to contact the Venables and Thompson families, but with no luck. The two boys were oblivious to this. We'll never know, but most likely they would have not cared even if they were aware. Still in their school uniform, they went down Breeze Hill, past the reservoir, then the pub and the local tyre place, and onto Merton Road. 2 miles in total they walked, purposefully in the opposite direction of their school. They would go in and out of the shops on the way to their final destination, the Strand Shopping Centre, stealing things along the way for the sake of stealing them, and when their pockets became full, they'd ditch what they stole to have space for more. It was in the Strand that Bobby stole the toy soldier from one of the shops, and the pair were then playing with it on the escalator, using the handrails to let it move up, and then drop onto the steps, and repeating. But a shopper had told them off for playing on the escalator because it was dangerous. A little while later, a mother was in Boots with her 3-year-old daughter and 2-year-old boy when she saw the pair, and assumed they were up to no good. She overheard John say, "Tomo, take one of these," but didn't think anything of it. At the same time, the shopper, who'd told the pair off for playing on the escalator, was sat on a bench inside the shopping centre when she saw the two boys leaving Boots, followed by a small boy, a toddler. They were calling the boy and getting him to follow them.
And just quickly say here, Rachel, I think everyone knows who we're talking about now, and which case we're talking about. I think you've set the scene perfectly here, but I think it's already quite chilling that we're already talking about them trying to take a boy here. So this was a goal, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, we'll go on to obviously say a little bit more about this, but my opinion on it was that they were intent on their objective that day. And if it hadn't have been James, it would have been someone else. And it nearly very was, wasn't it? Quickly afterwards, the boy's mother inside the store asked her daughter where her brother was. "He's gone outside with the boys," was her answer. The mum sped out of the store and saw her son walking off towards the two boys and started shouting him. People would say they overheard John telling the boy to go back to his mum before Bobby and John faded off into the background, heading off to mother care. The time now was 12:34.
So that's quite chilling, isn't it, really? Shall we leave the boys there at that moment in time, and let's rewind the day a little bit, because I'd like to introduce you to the Bulger family. Ralph was 26, unemployed, but not for the want of trying. He'd attended every training course he could be sent on and tried to apply for jobs all the time. But times were tough in that part of the UK in the early 90s. Jobs were not easy to come by. Denise was a year younger than Ralph by 25, and she worked as a checkout assistant at a supermarket in nearby Kirkby. They had a son, James, or Jamie, as many called him by, including his parents, who was 2 years old. Jamie was only small. He was 2 years and 11 months old, with his third birthday coming the following month. He had blonde hair with blue eyes, and even though his eyes were blue, his right eye had a twinge of brown in it. But, regardless of their colour, he was most definitely the apple of his mother's eye. Denise was very protective of her son, because previously she'd been pregnant with a little girl, Kirsty, who was sadly stillborn. It was on that day of Kirsty's passing that Ralph had proposed to Denise. Now, as is common in a tight-knit community, Denise had a large and close family. Her mother was one of 10 children, so she had lots of aunts and uncles, and Denise was the second oldest of 13 children, so her son had lots of aunts and uncles too. That Friday morning was no different than many others. Denise was with Jamie at her brother's house with her sister-in-law, Nicole. Jamie was playing with his cousin, Vanessa, when Nicole asked Denise if she wanted to go to the Strand. She had to change some underwear in TJ Hughes and buy some bits in the shopping centre. Denise said at a later point that she wouldn't have usually bothered going because there was a lot of hassle. She didn't have her pram with her, and Jamie was mischievous. He was always running off, but also, on the other hand, he loved going in Nicole's car, so she thought that he'd enjoy the ride in the back seat of the burgundy Ford Orion. And they would only be gone for an hour or so it's not going to be long, so she decided to go. Now, on that day, Jamie would be dressed in his grey tracksuit with white stripes down the side, a white knotted t-shirt, and a blue anorak with Puma trainers on. So off they went, arriving at the Strand at 2:15 p.m.
We left John and Bobby at around 12:34 going into mother care. They'd been in and out of shops, causing a nuisance, stealing when they could. Bobby really wanted a troll, but they hadn't managed to steal one yet. They managed to steal some batteries from Tandy and had gone outside the shopping centre, firstly going into McDonald's before being kicked out, and then into the building society next door. When asked, they said they were waiting for their mum, but after causing mischief in there, they were kicked out of the building society as well. They then made their way back into the Strand, with John saying to Bobby, "Tommy, my mouth is upset. I'm hungry." So they went into Tesco's, filling their pockets with yogurts, milkshake, and rice pudding pots before leaving. I think, like, just some of this explains how young they are, doesn't it? Like, they're looking for trolls, they're looking for toys, they're stealing batteries and causing a nuisance in building societies, but ultimately they're looking for toy trolls, you know? When you know what happens in this story, like, you forget how young they are.
Exactly, and also I was just thinking, do you know what, Rachel? You read my mind because I was thinking exactly the same thing. When John said to Bobby, "Tom, on my mouth is upset. I'm hungry." That is that is what you type of thing you'd expect to hear from a small child, isn't it? Because he's trying to verbalize being hungry, but he
How
doesn't
he's
have
feeling.
the words. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's. I think we forget sometimes, especially after all these years, like you said, how young they actually were.
Absolutely. They then went and bothered an old lady who was manning a charity stand about addiction, and also a shopper, before being shooed off and stealing some paint from Toys R Us. Playing football with one of the small tins of paint in the Strand before it nestled into a corner and was forgotten about by the boys, was later picked up by a shopper who took it home to fix something.
In the shopping centre, Denise and Nicole were being productive. Going back to TJ Hughes, they returned the underwear. They brought sausage rolls for the children, breaking them in half for them so they could hold them and eat them as they rode around in their shopping trolleys at Marks and Spencer's, because they were in there because Nicole wanted to pick up a few things and Jamie was enjoying a ride. They went inside of a shop called S4 Austin's. Oh God, I remember that shop. Do you remember that? Is it still exist?
No, I'm not sure I know that shop.
It was an old
Sorry.
woman's shop. It was for like old women clothes. I remember Mum going in there. Um, so anyway, they went inside of a shop called F. Austin's, with Denise thinking to herself she didn't like the look of a scruffy man she saw outside the shop, so she kept a closer eye on Jamie before they went to Tesco's to buy some sugar. Now at 3:37, they made their way to a popular local butcher's. It was quieter than normal, and Jamie was being naughty, trying to wander off. Denise, self-conscious about what people would think of her as a mother, she kept him close, trying to keep him quiet. Denise and Nicole were then being served, with Nicole at one point turning around, and she saw Jamie standing in the shop doorway, playing with the end of a cigarette. It was still lit, and he was playing with his foot while eating some Smarties he had in his hand. And she didn't think anything of it. I think nowadays you probably would think if you saw a little boy playing with a lit cigarette with his foot, wouldn't you? But I guess different times, isn't it?
Everyone smoked, yeah? Like, they were obviously smoking inside the Strand because they're in the butchers and,
Yeah.
yeah.
Now, shortly after Denise turned around, she was conscious that Jamie wasn't with her, and also conscious that she couldn't see him. So she went to the store entrance, shouting his name, looking for him, frantically wondering where he was. So she went back inside the butcher's, and the shop assistant asked her what was the matter. This would be the moment that changed the whole nation's perception on right and wrong, good and evil.
And yeah, I just kind of want to reiterate, not that you haven't made it clear there, Andrew, but it wasn't minutes that had passed, it was moments, it was seconds, like that Nicole had turned around, saw him in the doorway, turned back around. Denise had then settled the transaction, turned around again, and
Yeah.
as Jamie was in the shop entrance, the two boys, John Venables and Robert Thompson, saw the little boy. John called over to him, encouraging him to join them. When Jamie wandered over to the pair of boys, John then took his hand and led him away. As they walked away, a woman had saw the three boys, but didn't think there was anything amiss, and she smiled to herself because little Jamie reminded her of her own grandson. The three boys then went into TJ Hughes, up the stairs, and then left the shop and turned left towards the main square, with one of the older boys being overheard by a shopper saying to Jamie, "Come on, baby." The three underage boys left the Strand shopping centre. In this time, the shop assistant had directed Denise to the security guard's office to report her missing son. While alarming, this wasn't a new occurrence, and the shop assistant assumed they'd soon be reunited. Denise and Nicole made their way to the security office, but on their way, they went into several shops to check he hadn't wandered into one of them, and to ask the various staff members if they'd seen little Jamie. By the time they reached the security office, it was 3:45 p.m. Unbeknownst to Denise or anyone else, 3 minutes after Jamie had already been led out of the shopping centre. Denise was quite understandably beside herself when talking to the security guard. He, however, was quite the opposite. While Jamie was the first missing child reported on that day, missing children were quite common in the shopping centre, and they were usually found within 20 minutes or so. This information did not settle Denise, though. Denise went off to search in more shops, whilst the guards scrolled through the cameras in the shopping centre, trying to find sign of the missing little boy.
I mean, you're a parent, Rachel. I'm not, but you can't be placated. Someone's saying to you, "Don't worry, we usually find him within 20 minutes," but that's not going to make you think, "Okay, grand, then we'll just wander around and we'll find him." You just gotta.
I lost my daughter in a crowd for what could have only been 45 seconds. And in those seconds, like, I was extremely panicked. I was heavily pregnant, and it was a local fair, and it was a bright summer's day full of locals. Like, there was no imminent danger around. We weren't near a main road, and there weren't, like, plenty of ways out to exit where we were. But in those moments, my heart stopped, and you immediately think, what if the worst happens? How am I going to explain this? What has just happened? Where could she have gone? Like, there's so much that comes into your brain, and then out of nowhere, you catch a glimpse of them, and they have looked down to do something and looked back up, and you're gone. They're equally as unsettled as you are at the thought of losing you in a crowd. But oh my God, this whole story, I mean, I could only manage a couple of pages a night because I was just in absolute pieces. And reading the script today just brings it all back, and it's awful.
I think you put out wonderfully. Thank you, Rachel. So we're going to come back to the search for Jamie, but let's focus on his journey for the next few minutes. We won't go into every exact movement, but we'll give you the broad enough strokes to follow along. The pair went along Stanley Road with Jamie, the little boy, already getting tired and not wanting to walk. So they alternated between him walking and them semi-carrying him, lifting him, one boy with each arm as they walked. Now a taxi driver saw them walking along the road. It looked like Jamie was having fun when he was being lifted in the air, and the taxi driver laughed when he saw this. But he and other people did comment that when Jamie was put down, he would start to cry, with one person hearing him say, "I want my mom." That's heartbreaking, isn't it? To know that he said that.
I just, like, again, I feel like you forget how young he is. And you just desperately want to reach in and stop, and shake those two 10-year-olds and be like, what the fuck are you doing? Excuse my language,
Yeah.
but it's not fair.
The two boys led Jamie towards the canal. A woman saw them and thought Jamie looked confused, but did nothing because she assumed they were his older brothers. And you would do, especially before this happened, because this was like a turning point for society, wasn't it? So before then, you would have just thought he's with his older brothers. Like, what other reason would you have to think that a little boy was with two other little boys? They went under the bridge on the canal and started talking to each other about chucking Jamie in the canal, but they didn't. They did pick him up at this point. Between them, they turned him around and then they dropped him on his head on the canal path. Jamie started crying. The two boys then ran away up the slope, almost decided to run away from him, but they changed their mind and they went back down and they kept calling him baby. At that moment, when I was first read this, I was just urging, like, he can't change history, but I was urging that they did just run away and leave him.
Yeah.
Even though he went through this already. People saw them going down Park Street, past some flats, on towards Walton, where they'd started early in the day. They lifted James up as they made this journey. At some point, Bobby decided to kick Jamie in the ribs, which hurt him. They ended up at the bus stop on Breeze Hill, by the railing. Jamie was crying consistently by now, repeatedly saying he wanted his mum. "I want my mummy," was the cry the little boy would keep repeating, in vain. They reached the top of the reservoir. They sat on the last step, with Jamie between them. They then set off again. Jamie was sobbing, so John punched him, gripping hold of him so he couldn't leave. A woman was walking her dog along the reservoir and saw what was happening, so she approached the three boys, asking what was going on, and she noticed the 2 bumps on the little boy's head. John replied to her saying they just found him at the bottom of the road. They had no idea who he was, but they were heading towards the police station to take him there. They asked her where the nearest one was, and she directed them. They thanked her and walked off. She watched them as they left, and she felt uneasy. She was surprised when they walked in the opposite direction of where she had told them to go to get to the police station, but again, she did nothing.
I think that's one of the most frustrating parts of this story. And it's not on that woman at all. And it's not on any of the people that saw those boys that day. It's just the frustration overall, because I don't think anyone could predict what they went on to do. But the fact that there were so many opportunities to intervene, be an appropriate adult that would come along and be like, right, I'm taking custody of this boy and the pair of you and taking you to hospital, police station, wherever, to report what's going on here, because I don't feel right about it. But I mean, hindsight's a wonderful thing, right? And the fact that as a society we've come so far on now, but it really doesn't sit well with me that that happened.
I mean, I agree. I think it's nothing against that woman at all, but I think in today's age, no one would just see that happen. And even if someone just directed them towards the police station, as soon as they started going another way because they were so young, they would just stop them and take them there themselves, wouldn't they?
Yeah. At 4:15, Denise and Nicole made their way back to the security office, hoping to find Jamie already found and waiting for them there. But he wasn't. The security guard now called the police to report a missing child. PC Mandy Waller was the officer who was assigned to the call, with her commenting that it used to annoy her that she'd always have to deal with these types of calls because she was a woman, so it was assumed she'd be able to handle the upset parents and the children a lot easier. She did not enjoy it, nor did she find it easy. She didn't have children, and she had no intention of having any either. PC Waller arrived at the shopping centre at 4:37, now an hour after Jamie had gone missing. After speaking to the security guard and Denise and taking the details, she searched again in the shopping centre, focusing on shops such as the pet store that a little child might like and be attracted towards, but with no luck. She also discovered that a 4-year-old had gone missing at the same time, but he'd been found quickly. He'd told a story about a man with a white coat that had tried to entice him into a car. This was worrying for PC Waller. A bulletin was put out by the police on all local radio stations, asking for further information or any information on possible sightings of Jamie. An anonymous caller had called in and reported they'd seen a man with a ponytail in the shopping centre that day, and they thought he looked like the type of man that would kidnap children. Surprisingly, he was already known to police, so they made the effort to find him. When they did find him, they confirmed he was at the shopping centre, but he wasn't there at the time that Jamie went missing. So that lead had gone nowhere. Another caller said they'd seen Jamie in a car 40 minutes away in Southport, so that was another lead to follow up on. The search effort to find Jamie was ramped up. Media were informed. Taxi drivers, buses, trains were notified in case they saw a boy matching his description. Nicole's car was searched, and they went to the home of Jamie and searched the house too, to rule out that he had not returned there. They had no leads at all that were turning into anything that would give them any idea where he'd gone. A full-scale search was then undertaken, but Jamie could not be found.
The 2 boys, leading an ever-increasingly distressed Jamie, carried on towards Waltham. Near a busy road, a woman with her daughter and a woman walking her dog stopped the 2 boys, and they asked them what was going on. They told them that they'd found him and were heading toward Waltham police station. When probed by the dog walker why they were going to a police station further away from the one that was nearest to them where they found him, they said that a man they'd asked for directions directed them towards Waltham police station. Between them, the women got the 3 children across the busy road and watched as they walked off. Now I think, Rach, and for everyone listening, we've got the gist of the journey now. The 2 boys had multiple chances to either leave him, ask for help, or take him to a police station. They did none of these things, and While we haven't mentioned every little thing, they consistently abuse him physically along the way. Now, I'm not going to go into details about what they did to this poor boy, other than to say that they abuse him physically, they abuse him mentally, and it's largely believed some elements of the abuse had sexual motives behind it too. Once they had killed him, they had left his body on the railway line, hoping it would be run over, and then they went home, getting some chips at some point to share between them. 2 days later, children playing on a freight railway line just 200 yards from Walton Police Station and 2 miles from the Strand Shopping Centre found little Jamie's body, covered in blood and paint and chopped in two by a train. He had suffered that many injuries, 42 identified by the pathologist, that it couldn't be identified which one had been the fatal blow.
The hunt was on now, not to find Jamie, but to find his killer or killers. In what is now an iconic image of Jamie being led away out of the Strand by 2 boys, that grainy video was found. It was too poor quality to be able to identify the boys, so it was released to the media in the hope that someone, somewhere, would know who they were. One boy was detained for questioning, but was released when it became obvious he wasn't involved. Sadly for the boy, the build-up of emotion Jamie's death had caused, not only in the Merseyside area but nationwide and internationally, meant he had to flee Liverpool due to threats he was receiving from vigilantes. The police may be in disbelief about the potential suspects' ages, and combined with the poor quality CCTV video they had initially thought the pair were teenagers. It was only when, a few days later, when enhanced images of the video were shown on national television, that a woman recognised John and then remembered she had seen him skipping school with Bobby on the day Jamie went missing. John and Bobby were arrested on the 18th of February on the back of a report from the woman we just mentioned. News of the arrests quickly spread through the media. However, at this point, neither boy had been named and were not allowed to be identified in public. On the 20th of February, just 2 days after they were arrested, both were charged with the murder and abduction of 2-year-old James Bulger and the attempted abduction of the other boy we mentioned earlier in the episode. They were, at the time, the youngest to be charged with murder in the 20th century. As the 20th was a Saturday, they were held in police custody until they could attend South Sefton Magistrates Court in Bootle on Monday the 22nd of February. The pair were held on remand until November the 1st, when their trial would begin, with their parents being moved by police and given new identities due to the threats from vigilantes also. Controversially, the boys were given a full adult trial at the time due to the nature of their crime, despite their age and this being highly uncommon. This was done as the court, after argument from the prosecution, decided they had the ability to act with criminal intent, as they were mature enough to understand that what they were doing was something seriously wrong. Again, we could list the injuries and detail of what happened in court, but suffice to say there was enough forensic evidence, including DNA, to say that not only had the 2 boys killed Jamie, but they'd also done it brutally. It was never conclusively proven that there was a sexual element to the abuse, but no one really disputes that there was. On the 24th of November 1993, both John and Bobby were found guilty and would be sentenced to be detained at Her Majesty's pleasure. That is the usual substitute for life for a murder conviction for a child offender. The trial judge set an 8-year tariff, but then that was increased to 10 years by the Lord Chief Justice and then to 15 years by the then Home Secretary. 3 years later, in 1997, it was ruled illegal that the increase in the tariff by the Home Secretary, and in 1999, the European Commission on Human Rights determined the pair had been denied a fair trial and fair sentencing. In October of 2000, the original tariff of 8 years was reinstated, which meant that they would be released the following year. John and Bobby appealed to the court in early 2001 to be granted anonymity for life, which was granted, and they were released in June of that year with their new identities.
Just a quick one here. I know we didn't put in a script, but again, just to reiterate how young these boys were, when they were being interviewed by the police, I can't remember which one it was, but one of them said to the police, are they going to take him to the hospital to make him alive again? And it just shows you the concepts in their head that obviously they knew what had happened to him, but they thought he could just be taken to the hospital and fixed.
Yeah, yeah. I feel like at this point, obviously, also just want to highlight like there's such a level of detail in that book that you can choose to read or listen to that will give you an idea of the injuries that James Bulger suffered that day and the abuse as well, like the physical and the mental abuse that that little boy went through. We've chosen not to detail that. That's not the kind of podcast we are. You know, we definitely don't want to address some of that abuse because it's quite frankly, it's too much for us to talk through, like, and come out like and able to like present to you all. But what I would say is the police investigation and the interviews that the book goes into such great detail of some of the police responses as some of the boys, as Andrew just said, you know, are they going to take him back to the hospital to fix him? Can I go home now was a common theme, as the confessions, as you like, were teased out of them. You know, they did both keep on saying, right, that's it now, can I go home? Their kind of innocence of, you know, I won't be kept here because I've told them the truth, you know. And just to reiterate as well, the police that were interviewing the boys had never had to even consider or set up interviews for any people of that age. They had to get, you know, appropriate adults in some cases the parents were sat in as well, which caused everyone a distress because, you know, the boys didn't really want to confess in front of their mums and dads, you know, that they were sagging, that they took the boy. They initially denied everything, and then when it was all teased out, like I think it was Bobby's mum was just like screaming at him like in the police interview, which obviously wasn't helping the situation, because they had to be detained and kept away from the press. They made little makeshift rooms, didn't they, Andrew, in their police custody suites that they were both kept at, which were far apart again. You know, and these boys were like treating it almost as a little bit of a stayover, you know, oh, this is exciting. Like they just drift from being naive young boys of like, you know, oh gosh, the police are interviewing me, you know, but when can I go home, to some of the stuff they're saying and it being like harrowing, and you just thinking, my God, at what stage in your life have you been so like, you know, exposed to something so awful that you think that this is okay behaviour? And like, you know, one more thing that I want to kind of say, they went for a bag of chips and they went to a video game store to rent a DVD after doing this. Like,
Crazy.
and then they walked in through their front doors without a care in the world.
The book does go into a lot of detail also about their upbringing and their lives as well. Not that it excuses anything, but
No.
it helps paint the bigger picture.
Yeah, and I feel like on that point, like nature versus nurture, like this kind of case, as I was reading the book, and I would urge everyone to go out and buy a copy if you can stomach it. That argument, if you are one side or the other, you will flip between both reading that book.
So where are we now? It was a general assumption and belief by both professionals and the general public that Bobby Roberts was the worst out of the two boys, the one that was the leader. And this belief was actually held all the way through their detention by, I put here some, but it was actually by most of the professionals. It is now generally accepted, however, that while neither were innocent or could be excused for what they did, John was the leader and instigator out of the two. From what is reported, Bobby, since his release, has led a quiet life. Actually, I don't even think he's in the UK, is he? But he's led a quiet life, trying not to be identified and stay out of the limelight. John, on the other hand, is another story. In 2008, 7 years after his release, he was arrested on two separate occasions. Once for a fray for a drunken fight, which he received a warning from the probation office for, and given it was from the probation office because he was on the life license, remember. And later on that year in 2008, he was arrested for the possession of cocaine. Now, it was not released what happened about the cocaine arrest, but he wasn't sent back to prison. In March of 2010, John would be recalled to prison for breaching the terms of his release. Specifically, he was found to have downloaded and distributed child pornography. In July of 2010, he would plead guilty to those charges and be sentenced to 2 years in prison, and he would be released in July of 2013. In 2017, he was convicted of possession of child abuse images, again, and has remained in prison since. With every parole hearing so far, and I think there's been 4 so far, deeming him to be a risk to society.
They're also, both of them have been given a lifetime ban from the city of Liverpool, and John has repeatedly, under his new identity, obviously, breached that and returned. You know what? Obviously, at the points that he's not been incarcerated, and it again, I just think that kind of plays to that defiance factor of I've been gifted this new identity, and I could well be leading a very quiet life surrounded by people that have no idea what happened to me and what I did and was capable of doing in childhood, but quite the opposite.
Might we might say as well that with John, it is now being multiple identities, hasn't it?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So he is given a brand new identity at each time. And I know that there have been other people prosecuted for trying to identify him in the public domain. So other people have gone to prison and served time for outing him as not only a paedophile, but James Bulger's killer. And they've suffered the consequences because of him. I actually don't even want to think about the burden that he is on the taxpayer. Okay, well, I mean, Andrew's told the facts of the story here without going into the finer detail of the abuse that was suffered at the hands of these 2 young boys. And I know Andrew has, perhaps I haven't so much towards the end, been tried to be as unbiased as possible, but it's just really quite difficult for me. And I think that is because I'm a parent. I cannot and will not comprehend the evil, even if that person or people have suffered abuse of any kind. It does not warrant any action on another that could, in turn, make them suffer. And I feel like the minute that that child was kidnapped, the minute that James Bulger went missing, he was, the abuse and the torture started. And if he had have been found, my God, the damage was done. The boys kept on repeating to him, like, Mummy's not here anymore. Like, he wasn't even 3, he's crying, I want my mummy. Like, they were taking such joy in his upset and anguish, like, even before, they dealt the fatal blow, like, they had no intention of returning him. I fully believe, they were obviously talking when they walked past the canal about dumping him in there, but yeah, it's just awful. And all of the other families that were impacted, the boys that found James's body, their families suffered because they were brought under question. How did you know to go on the railway that day? They were interviewed on television, which there's a documentary that goes into further detail about this kind of stuff. But, they were proper scousers, and the woman that interviewed them had said that, they couldn't keep it together kind of thing. And so that led people to think, did they have something to do with it? Like, just really awful accusations that were shared afterwards. Like,
Oh, it's crazy thinking because they just went looking for footballs on a railway track, didn't they? So it was like they were literally doing what boys do. And I think to this, when they took Jamie, I was 12 years old. I couldn't even fathom, like, at that age, or even at this age, to be fair, obviously, but at that age, doing such a thing, it's really difficult. I know those of you that have been listening to us for years now would know my stance on rehabilitation. That I believe that the prison should be for rehabilitation. I believe in the rule of law, and that most can be rehabilitated, which is then leaves the prison for the people that can't be, because there is a small section of society that need to be kept away from the public. And I think with this one, I think with the 2 boys, what they did was, I don't like using this term, but I think it was probably pure evil. And if you look at the two boys, well, they can never be excused for what they've done. One of them tries to be rehabilitated and blend into society, and one quite blatantly is a danger to society even to this day. So I think that proves my point that some people do unfortunately need to be, once they have been caught for something, the society just needs to admit that they can't be rehabilitated. It's a very small percentage. We're not talking everyone, like some people online would have you say. And I mean, it's going to be tough. How can they release John now? When even I know the last release, I think in January, the last attempt, James Bulger was coming out and appealing that he wasn't released. But at some point, they probably will release him, won't they? And what's he going to do again? New identity, set up somewhere new. You'd imagine he's just going to fall back into exactly doing what he was doing before.
He is a danger to society. And can I just add as well, the abuse that Denise received at the time was wholly unacceptable. She has to live for the rest of her life with the thoughts of her own, like, wrongdoing that day, that she let go of his hand and that she took her eye off him for a second. She doesn't need anyone else to remind her that she shouldn't have done that. And the fact that people, like John's mother, who spent a good period of time with the writer of the book that Andrew and I are referencing, said that she would like some airtime to challenge Denise on the wrongdoing that day. That's how at the top of the story. And honestly, if that is your lasting thought on after knowing what your son has done and what he's capable of, your lasting thought is that, yeah, I wouldn't mind having a chat with that mother and speaking mum to mum, about what she did wrong that day. Wow.
Yeah. I would have to say I don't like to try and correct you often, Rachel, but I wouldn't even describe it as wrongdoing, what Denise said. It was just what a parent does. You can't be. No one's perfect. You're going to make mistakes, and 99.99% of the time, these mistakes will mean absolutely nothing because you turn around and you grab your child's hand or you notice. It was like you said, like 20 or 30 minutes ago, it was moments. These boys had already tried to take a boy, and it was moments when Jamie went. And Jamie was also prone to be mischievous and trying to wander off, so it would have been easier for them to get him because initially it probably would have been a little bit fun for him, wouldn't it? Like, let's go towards these two new boys. So yeah, I know what you're saying. Like, I just I just think that it's a tough one, isn't it? And I
But
feel
absolutely, my end statement is that she will be giving herself hard enough time. There is absolutely categorically no need for anyone to add to her plate what must go through her head every second of the day.
I think this is probably a good moment for us to wrap up, if that's okay, Rachel.
Yeah, well, I feel like we could go on about it forever, and I'm definitely yeah.
Do urge, like, I don't have to try and encourage books, but it's an audiobook. I know it's in most libraries. You can actually get audiobooks from libraries now as well. It's not easy, but I think it's worthwhile getting a full picture on it. So we don't have a normal wrap up here. I think it would be a little bit wrong to try and set the scene for you because we all know exactly what happened. But please, whoever you are, wherever you are, whoever your loved one is, young or old, please just hold them a little bit tighter today and be thankful that they're with you. Thank you, everyone, and we shall speak to you soon.
Bye.